We've been talking about this man who came to Jesus wanting to know what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. We're told that he was a lawyer, and so we shouldn't be surprised that he did what lawyers so often do. Knowing that he couldn't live up to the expectations of God's commands, he went looking for a loophole. He wanted to see if there was any wiggle room in one specific word. He asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" So that's when Jesus told this story that we know as the parable of the Good Samaritan. There was a man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, not a long journey, but one that was known to be a treacherous one. And sure enough, he fell into the hands of robbers. They beat him up, took everything he had, and left him by the side of the road to die. Shortly thereafter, a priest came walking by, but rather than helping out, he passed by on the other side. Then, shortly after, a Levite, only he did the same. Now realize the masterful scene that Jesus is setting up here. This lawyer had asked about that word neighbor. A neighbor is someone who lives in close proximity to you, someone who shares things in common with you, someone whose life occupies some of the same space as yours. And the man was really asking just how close someone needed to be in order for him to be obligated to help him out. Well, by any definition of the term neighbor, the priest and the Levite in Jesus' story were neighbors to the man dying there on the side of the ditch. For starters, they were both Jews, just like he was. They shared a race, a culture, a religion with him. Secondly, it seemed as though they lived in Jericho, just like he did. By any definition of the term, they were obligated to help this man out. They were his neighbor, and yet they found reason to pass by on the other side. Who knows, maybe they thought the man deserved it. He had been traveling that treacherous road all by himself without protection. Maybe they thought it would have cost them too much, that helping him out was too great an investment of time and money. Maybe they thought the risk was too great. Maybe they wondered whether those robbers were still hanging around just looking for their next target. Do some of those excuses sound familiar? You see, if in our hearts we are harboring the very same religion that lawyer was, one that depends on our obedience to God's commands, then we too will inevitably try to lower the standards and go looking for loopholes. We'll maybe say that the cost of helping someone out is too great that we can't afford it. We'll maybe talk about the risk and wonder whether our help will be taken advantage of or abused. We'll perhaps use it as an excuse to sort of celebrate our own superiority over the person. We'll say, they got themselves into that mess, they can get themselves out. I warned you that this kind of self-analysis isn't always fun or easy, and yet Jesus wants to point out the symptoms of this problem so that we can see if this kind of religion is really what is running and ruling in our hearts. Like any skilled physician, Jesus simply wants to diagnose the problem so that he can then lovingly apply its only cure.